Hello everyone, Stuckery here, and
Hey, I've seen that guy. He's on TikTok. This guy always comes up on my recommended. Like, this guy's always there on my recommended shit.
To the History of Everything podcast YouTube channel. On today's episode, it's time for another Dumb Events in History. Personally, my favorite segment. I love actually doing these.
Yeah, somebody's really good at TikTok as
we're going to
well.
tell the story about how a small town in West Virginia managed to get help from the Soviet Union and cause a massive embarrassment for the United States.
What?
Which, yep, you heard me correctly, but how exactly does that happen? Well, let me explain. So this whole story takes place in southwest Virginia, near the border with Kentucky in the United States. There's this small unincorporated community there named Vulcan. Now,
how can it not be incorporated though? Like, shouldn't it be incorporated? When that perhaps that's some other point. How can it not be incorporated? Like, isn't that like very close to the east? Isn't that the most like developed part in America as well? Like, how can it not be incorporated?
Mind you, Vulcan was once a thriving coal mining town.
Oh,
back in the early 1900s.
It explains it, because coal went like, and then went down. Like, today coal means nothing.
In the 1960s, the mines that mined the coal dried up. And a bunch of the residents that were there decided to move away in search of employment elsewhere.
Makes sense.
As there really wasn't any other kind of industry in the town. No longer being a productive community, Vulcan's infrastructure would, over time, gradually deteriorate.
Makes
until
sense.
eventually, even the state government just forgot that the town existed. So goes the fate of many coal mining towns, actually. But forgetting about this town is exactly where we're going to start to run into a little bit of a problem. You see, the town of Vulcan was built on a fork of the Big Sandy River near the main line of the Norfolk and Western Railroad. Other than that railroad, there really was no infrastructure. There was no...
Imagine living in a city, right, where infrastructure is not, like, you know, kept up, and there's no upkeep, you know, like, they probably still pay their taxes, right, but there's no infrastructure, none of that money actually makes its way back to you. I would probably start hating the government and, like, the state, because my tax money wouldn't be used for anything good, or anything productive for me. It's the same thing, when I walk outside, right, I pay taxes, every single thing you guys donate, I pay taxes off that. But imagine if I went outside and none of that money was visible in anywhere like I walk around. Like if there was just holes in the roads outside. Like near me, they're building an entire massive new highway on that massive road that, like, you know, the massive road, right? Which is fucking lit. I can see my money being used somewhere productive. Like that's really, really good. And that makes me feel like what I do for my country is good. What I do when I pay taxes is good. What, like, it makes me feel proud, right? That like the stuff actually gets used somewhere. Start of my country, bro. Sure. Why care about the few hundred people? U.S. government. Yeah, exactly. I need the promised. Shut the fuck up, man.
No road that connected Vulcan to other towns or across the Kentucky River. Only a very dinky little suspension bridge. And when I say dinky, I'm not exaggerating that. This was a very old bridge that was at this point falling apart in the 60s. It already had a series of floorboards missing, and this is what people were using, particularly the children, in order to get across and get to school every single day. Sometimes even in order to get to the bridge in the first place, the children had to crawl under railroad carts, which was a very dangerous practice that actually resulted in...
Imagine a fucking... What? Like, it didn't know, like, you just makes it feel like, how the fuck did, like, a state just forget about it, or, like, the county, or what the fuck it is, how did they just forget about an entire, like, fucking community? Did nobody, like, did they not have, like, a representative, like, a mayor or something that, like, it just makes me think, like, what the fuck happened?
One of the kids getting his...
That's normal in Latvia, what the fuck?
...legs crushed one day. So now I know what you're gonna say, Stack, okay, this can't be the only way in and out, there has to be something else that they can do. And you're right, there was. But there's another catch to it. You see, the alternate route was a gravel road that was maintained by the railroad company. This road ran parallel to the tracks, and it passed through Vulcan and continued north to
just have strong hands on God, literally.
The community of Delmore, which was located around 5 miles away. The problem is that this road was not legally accessible to the public. The railroad company did not want anyone on this road and had hung no trespassing signs everywhere, stating that it was not their responsibility to maintain and protect people on the road, as this was their property. Basically, the company going, yeah.
Well, but it just seems like the company was just like... But again, that's normal for America, isn't it? Like, companies not really giving a fuck about the people, isn't it? That I feel like this is nothing out of the ordinary. I think you always hear like stories about like companies pretty much just fucking over the people that like work at the company, work at like people fucking over like people that just, you know, in general, like throwing out like massive like waste of toxic waste out of fucking anywhere. Like it's just America. That is America. That is a fucking America. Like America doesn't give a like companies and people in America don't give a fuck about anybody else but themselves. Like let's just be honest. That's how it is.
Whatever, guys, it's not our problem. Who cares? So this continued for years until in 1975 the bridge finally collapsed, which then of course led the community to have no other alternative but to actually use the road that was illegal for them to trespass on to get out. But they don't want to break the law, so they instead try to do something and appeal to West Virginia's government, sending a letter asking them to help build a new bridge. But the officials of West Virginia didn't really see a point in doing so.
What?
I mean, this was just some small town of 200 people. It had no real industry. There was nothing productive about it. It wasn't providing anything to the state. So why should the state take care of it? They basically ignored it. So what can the townspeople do?
Imagine like if you could pretty much got that fucking like said like no, we're not gonna do anything. Like I will again at this point I understand why these guys are like really fucking disconnected from like the other part of America. I would probably hate my state at that point. Like why aren't they doing anything? We're the people, we live here and stuff like that. Like I feel it's just fucking scummy.
If the United States wasn't going to help, then they would have to look elsewhere. Thus, in 1977, their mayor wrote to the Soviet embassy in Washington, D.C., as well as officials in communist East Germany, describing Vulcan's plight and requesting foreign aid to help build a bridge. Yeah.
What? Who the fuck came up with that idea? Just think of the brainchild that fucking came up with that idea of just, let's just ask the Soviet Union and Eastern... What? Like, imagine being like the brainchild and that with that fucking idea. Just thinking that, like, they must have done it as a joke. It must have been, like, kind of a joke, and then they decided to do it. That must have been it, right? It must have been a joke. And then they're just happy that it happened. We're gonna wait till this. We need the way out of this. The weird communist chat. Let's call Gorbachev, lads. Chill, literally, man, literally. Fucking chat moves.
They reached out to the Soviets. Mind you, we are still in the middle of the Cold War, so the moment that the Soviets see an opportunity to embarrass the United States, they're like, hell yeah, of course we're gonna do that. So they go and dispatch some journalists to Vulcan, and by interviewing and broadcasting the locals' woes, the Soviets finally bring some attention to this little community that was being ignored by its own government.
What?
It did not take long before newspapers all across the country from coast to coast were talking about Vulcan, this little community that no one had ever actually heard of before. As an example, you have the Spokane Daily Chronicle, which wrote...
It almost makes me think of that guy in the cave. You know, Internet Storm made a video about him. Like, what a guy like called, like, something like Flinch or something like Flynn. That guy was stuck in the cave. It was such, like, a small town, small things, like, and being stuck in the cave was probably not, you know, national fucking news, but it just became national news because of one guy, like, that journalized it, right? That's a big brain plan, so ask Soviets for help, though. Yeah, it's a massive big brain plan. Like, fucking hell. And they think that maybe those motherfuckers actually thought it would work, and it just fucking did. Like, whoa.
And I quote... Soviet officials were amused today by reports that the small town of Vulcan, West Virginia, has appealed to the Kremlin for foreign aid. The town, with a population of 200, asked the Soviet government for financial help to build a bridge after the town was turned down by the U.S. and West Virginia governments.
Dude. But
which
yeah,
sounds...
imagine the embarrassment, though. Imagine the embarrassment of being the U.S. government. I hope that bridge still stands today. I hope that bridge still stands
absolutely hilarious, but also, again, you have to remember that this is in the middle of the Cold War, and there are some people that would not find this very funny. As news got out, radio stations and local newspapers in the area started receiving bomb threats from people all across the country, saying that if they received any form of red help whatsoever, whatever bridge or infrastructure or anything that was built would be destroyed. The situation was now taking a little bit of a darker turn.
I would say
so
that.
on December 17th, 1970...
Yeah, it's amazing propaganda. Like, your own government doesn't care about it? Sure, just ask what you should propose to what's, like, the enemy. Just ask them. Why? Because you would look like a fucking fool if you don't help your own like people, you will look like a dumbass, a fool. You'll be bamboozled, quite well bamboozled. Like it's. Whoa.
77, the Soviets send down a senior journalist in order to interview the people of Vulcan and get a survey of what the problem is. And he was actually authorized to promise the locals that his government was going to keep an eye on the whole situation. If the US would not do something about building this bridge, then the Soviet government would foot the bill and just get them their bridge. Almost immediately after this visit had taken place, word filtered into the town that the West Virginian government had, in an emergency session, gone ahead and authorized the building of a $1.3 million bridge. Because damn it, they weren't going to let the Soviets one-up them.
Goddamn straight.
2 years later,
it's America. Fucking hell. How... Oh, man, I'm sorry, man. This is just such a fucking weird situation, man. Yeah, 1.3 mil, that's like... Fucking Joe Biden probably like farts more money than 1.3 million, man. Like, come on.
Vulcan finally got its one-lane bridge connecting them to the outside world. And all it cost them was creating an international incident and embarrassing their own country. But everyone, that is the end of today's dumb event in history. Please let me know in the comment section what it is that you'd like us to cover next. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe.
Bro, that's lit, man. That's actually a really fucking good video. I always seen this guy on TikTok. I never seen him like his actual channel 100%. Like, that's a fucking subscribe. Money that just don't let it be from the it's yeah, that's I love, man. I love that. That's actually fucking amazing, bro. That's actually fucking amazing.